Hey, welcome to my channel. I teach the Bible here. I hope you'll subscribe, make comments, and hit the bell, share this video with somebody else. Do everything you can. Help me get this out to as many people as I can. I'm going to do a lesson from the 20th chapter of Exodus. We're going to take a look at the Ten Commandments, and I call this message the Ten Commandments, not suggestions, okay? You know, sometimes we do stupid things, and every now and then I'll do something stupid. A couple times a year when I get up in the morning to cook breakfast, and I'll cook scrambled eggs and oatmeal usually, and we have a gas stove, so there's an actual flame there. A couple times a year I'll forget to turn off the flame on one of the burners when I sit down to eat. So I'll come back later in the morning and oops, I left the burner on. I go, man, that was stupid, you know. Sometimes we do stupid things, but you know what? I still love me, even though I do stupid things. And if you look at Romans 13, 8 through 10, and I'm going to jump back to that here. Romans chapter 13, 8 through 10. You're going to find out how we can summarize and keep the Ten Commandments, the principle that makes it possible for us to keep the Ten Commandments even today. Romans 13, 8 through 10. Let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another, for he who loves his fellow man has fulfilled the law. You know what? If we love one another, we'll fulfill the law. And we're talking about the Ten Commandments. That's what that means. The only debt we should have is to love one another. Loving your fellow man fulfills the law. The command summed up by love your neighbor as you love yourself. You know, love doesn't harm your neighbor. That fulfills the law. But listen, I can love myself when I do something stupid. Why is it so hard to love somebody else when they do something stupid? That's the point. If I could figure out with capacity from God to love other people when they do things stupid, like I love myself when I do things stupid, I can keep the law that summarizes the law. So the law is the Ten Commandments. Now, we know from Galatians 2:16 that we're justified. That means declared not guilty by faith, not by keeping laws. Okay? So that doesn't save us. Keeping the law doesn't save us. But keeping the law, understanding the principles, teaches us how to live on the planet without messing things up. And so I want to take a look at the Ten Commandments. They're not suggestions, they're commandments. And see what God has to say and understand them completely. Look at Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 and 2. And God spoke all these words. He said, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. Okay? He spoke all these words. That's what he says there. He spoke all these words. He didn't use the Ten Commandments. He didn't call them that there. Now, he gives the Ten Commandments again after Moses broke the tablets the first time when he was angry at the people because they were worshiping a false god. And he does that in the 34th chapter and verse 28. And I want to show you where he calls them the Ten Commandments. Exodus 34, 28. And he says, Moses was there with the Lord 40 days and 40 nights without eating bread or drinking water. And he wrote on the tablets the words of the covenant, the Ten Commandments. That's where the Ten Commandments are called the Ten Commandments the first time. So they're all the words of the Lord. Now they're the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments are the words of the Lord. This is word from God, and it's a word of a covenant. A covenant is an agreement between God and man, the terms of which are established by God, and then man is supposed to fulfill it. So there's kind of an outline that you can think of the Ten Commandments. Verses 2 through 7 talk about right relationship with God. Verses 8 through 11 talk about right relationship with worship of God. And verses 12 through 17 talk about right relations in society. And if we pay a lot of attention to the Ten Commandments, we'll learn how to live effectively in the world. Let's look at verses 2 through 7 and think about right relations with God. Verses 2 through 7 of Exodus chapter 20. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the fathers to the third and the fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commands. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. So it gives us 3 of the 10 commandments in those verses. Number 1, this is pivotal. This is where it all starts. It's the basis of everything. You shall have no other God before me. You shall have no other God before me. Only God is God. Nothing else is a substitute for God. Only God is God. That's the thing. He's exclusive. He's exclusive. God is God. All others are false gods. There are a lot of false gods today. Money is obviously one. Success, fame, all those things are false gods. Whenever you elevate something above your relationship with God, above God himself, it becomes a false god. I think some obvious ones floating around today would be things. I think abortion is a false god to a lot of people. It's an evil thing, killing another human being. I think that government power to control people is a false god. It always has been. I think that climate change has become a worship, a false god, and it is destructive. It has the capacity, if totally imposed on people around the world, it'd kill half the population of the earth. So it's a false god. That's the first commandment. You shall have no other gods before me. Only God is God. Commandment number 2, you shall not make for yourself an idol in the form of anything in heaven or on earth. Now what this does, second commandment, kind of protects violating the first commandment. People would tend to have idols, and they would elevate them to a place of God in their life, and they'd end up with a false god. So you're not supposed to make an idol in the form of anything in heaven or on earth. You worship the Creator, not the creation. That's the point, okay? This protects violating that first command. There are 14 Hebrew words for idols. Here, the word means a resemblance or form of something in creation. It's not a prohibition against art. Some people have confused it for that, but it's just saying that no art form, whether anything you create, can be a substitute for God. You can't elevate it to that position. Like the golden calf that was elevated to a god, was one of the Egyptian gods. So what this does is it demands exclusive devotion to God as God. Verse 5 deserves a little explanation. Verse 5 says this: You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing children for the sin of the fathers to the third and the fourth generation of those who hate me. The point of that is that children tend to repeat the errors of their parents, or the good things of their parents. And if people keep making the same mistakes their parents made because that's what they learned, God will continue to punish that, okay? So the second command, you shall not make for yourself an idol in the form of anything in heaven or on earth. We don't bow down to idols, and we don't put them in the place of God. Commandment number 3, you shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. There's a whole lot more to this than people realize. God's name is a lot more important and powerful than people think. God's name reflects his nature, his being, his person, his teaching, his doctrine, his moral and ethical teaching. His name reflects all those things. And when we get those things wrong, we misuse his name, And a lot of times people teach things and say things that they believe are God's will, and they present them as God's will. And when they present something that's false in God's name, they're misusing his name. Got to be careful with that. We accuse God of things and teaching, etc., that do not reflect his nature. The most obvious thing. People ask Oprah, how do you, is there just one way to God or many? And she'll go, well, there are many roads to God. Folks, to suggest there's one road to God, that's Jesus. He's the only way you can get there, okay? And what he paid on the cross. And when people use God's name to promote that kind of teaching, they're misusing the name of God. It's a whole lot more, and it bothers me, and it's wrong. I think when people go, "Oh my God," that you should be much more reverent when you refer to God. But misusing His name is doing anything and saying anything and teaching anything that reflects on His character that is not true to His character. Exodus 20 verses 8 through 11, right relationship to the worship of God. Verses 8 through 11 of the 20th chapter. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but on the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your manservant, or your maidservant, nor your animal, nor your alien within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, but He rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Okay, the right relationship with worship was that they were to keep the Sabbath. That's the fourth command. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. This all goes back to creation. God made the entire world in 6 days, and He rested on the seventh day, and He kept it holy. And He is codifying this in law when He gives the Ten Commandments. The Sabbath was a day to rest and cease from work for everybody. Take a break, have a day off. It was also a day where they reflected on the movement of God and worshiped Him, which is kind of what we need to do when we worship Him. Reflect on what He has done for us. And it would be Saturday. Okay, was the Sabbath. Today Christians tend to worship on Sunday. It's not a law. Okay, it's kind of a tradition. I know a lot of churches that have Saturday evening services and even services at other times. But and there's a church in I think it's in South Korea. They're so big that they have church every day of the week. That's okay. We're not under the law. We don't have to keep the law to save us. But the point is that you need to take some time to, number one, rest. Number two, reflect on and worship God. That's a good idea to do some of that every day. Exodus 20 verses 12 through 17. Right relations with society. It says a lot here, and it goes quick. It says, honor your father and mother so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his manservant, or maidservant, or his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. This is right relations with society. How do you live in society? And He's giving some guardrails to keep us from messing up life. And it starts by honoring, commandment number 5, honor your father and your mother. Parents are God's delegates to the family, and we're supposed to obey our parents. In fact, I think one of the things that can be said about obeying parents is that we learn how to respect and obey God by parents insisting that we respect and obey them. They're God's authority in the family. He put them there for that. There is a real effort in society today to break up the family. If you break up parenting, you've broken up the family. Parents carry the authority of God to train their children, and their children should recognize that authority in the family, because the parents are in charge. Kids need people in charge of them. That's parents. God ordained it that way, put it together. Children should show affection for their parents. They should make sure that the parents know that they love them and respect them. Secondly, they should seek their wisdom. I was thinking about this. I wish, my dad died in 1997, but I really wish, and I'm older now than he was when he died. I'm 73. He was just 10 days shy of 70 when he died. But I wish I could sit down with my dad and seek his wisdom, even today. We need to seek the wisdom of our parents and our grandparents. We need to seek their wisdom. That's why kids need parents and grandparents, so they can gain their wisdom from them. Fourth, they were to take care of their parents in their old age. They didn't have retirement programs or Social Security or state help or anything like that. The program for all of that was the family. And in a lot of ways, the family ought to be that today. And no matter what, kids should take care of mom and dad in their old age. Who took care of them when they were young? Mom and dad did. So take care of mom and dad when they're old. Okay, that's first. The right relationship with society demand, number 5, that you honor your father and your mother. There's a lot more to that than meets the eye, isn't there? Command number 6, you shall not murder. There's 7 words in Hebrew for killing. One of those words includes premeditation and intentionality. Only one of them. That's murder. It's not killing, it's murder. Murder is killing that is done with intentional violence and is intended to kill. And it's used 47 times in the Old Testament, and it is truly murder every time it's used. This does not apply, murder does not apply to accidents. It doesn't apply to killing animals and beasts if they need to be destroyed because they destroyed people, or if they need to be eaten. Okay, it does not apply there. It does not apply to execution for people who do horrible crimes. It does not apply to killing people in war. In the Army, I kind of struggled with that for a while. I got over it, but it doesn't apply to that. It does not apply to policing and keeping order in society. And it does not apply to defending your home. It does apply to self-murder, suicide. It would apply to that. If you kill yourself, it's intentional violence for the purpose of killing you. Now, does God forgive that? I believe that if you're a Christian and you get to a place where you can't make it and you just do the wrong thing and kill yourself, I think the grace of God is bigger than sin, and you can be forgiven because you live in the midst of God's grace. And great godly people make great mistakes, and sometimes they do it in great pain. So I don't think that necessarily assumes that a person is lost and going to hell because they killed themselves. Grace is bigger than sin. If it's not grace. So let me tell you something else that fits in here. Okay. Murder is the intentional, violent, premeditated taking of a life. What happens when you abort a baby? As a separate human being from the mother, has separate DNA, and abortion fits the biblical description of murder. It's premeditated and it's intentional. That is my conviction. And it's one of we've killed 63 million babies in this country by abortion in the last just short of 50 years. And the ruling in the Supreme Court didn't do away with abortion. It just gave the legality back to the states where it probably belongs. It still goes on. People rejoice in it. It's terrible. Okay. Commandment number 7. You shall not commit adultery. Any married person having sex with someone other than his or her spouse has committed adultery. The genius of marriage is that 1 + 1 = 1. God puts them together for life, and that's how it's supposed to work. That's how it's supposed to work. The basic building block for humanity is the family. The basic building block for society is the family. And families should be protected. And I think God put this moral law into place to protect the family. If he protects the marriage, he protects the family. That's what he's doing here. And so adultery, people having sex with someone they're not married to when they're married, has the tendency to destroy the family, leads to destruction, divorce. Some people can work through it sometimes, but usually their marriage is different than it was before. So the punishment for adultery, if you look at Deuteronomy 22:22, was death. They were supposed to be killed. And all this was set up to protect the family, protect the marriage, protects the family, protect the family, you protect society. We need to grasp some of that again today. Commandment number 8, you shall not steal. The idea behind this is profound, and it starts with with Psalm 24:1, where it says that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. In other words, God owns everything. He's the owner of everything. Okay? Now, no one can take property used by another that is owned by another. You know why? God provided that property for that other person. This is about property rights. And if you take someone's property that God allowed him to have, you have violated God's ownership over that property because he allowed that other person to have it, and you took it from the other person. It is someone usurping God's property rights over that property by taking it from the person God allowed to have it. You violate God when you steal from a person, and this establishes property rights in the Scripture. They are God ordained. They should be very clear in the laws of a society. Stealing should be a law that when you break it, you're punished. So it stops. Commandment number 9, you shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. This is a legal thing, but it's all over the place. False testimony offends God because it says that you despise the truth. Now, if you can't tell the truth in a court of law, you can't establish anything, and the whole thing falls apart. And if you can't tell the truth in a society, you can't function. And we live in a culture and a society where it's fallen apart. Nobody tells the truth. A lot of politicians, all politicians lie. Some of them, that's all they do, okay? And it is destructive. And what's wrong about it? Okay, God is the source of truth. And when you don't tell the truth, you are offensive to God's character, okay? Which is based on truth. It dishonors God to not tell the truth. Who has the native tongue of lies? The devil does. It's because everything he does dishonors God, and it starts with him never telling the truth. We have people in this country that never tell the truth. That needs to end somehow. There needs to be a real revival of morality. It is offensive to God because it offends his nature to not tell the truth. People need to tell the truth, and that needs to be really, really basic in society. Commandment number 10, you shall not covet your neighbor's property. We've established that property is ultimately owned by God. He lets other people own it. He delegates it to other people. And if you steal it